The search for a coronavirus cure. Could it be a medical arms race? My interview with Kirill Dmitriev, the CEO of Russian Direct Investment Fund, which has been cooperating with pharmaceutical companies to come up with what they consider as an effective therapeutic. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Russia said an antiviral drug it's funding has shown promising results in early clinical trials. It has called for a global collaborative approach to finding an effective COVID-19 therapeutic treatment. Will that be a great solution? The RDIF, also known as Russia Direct Investment Fund, has provided $2 million in funding for the project. Earlier, I talked to Kirill Dmitriev, the CEO of RDIF, on the future of the new drug and the importance of international cooperation. And I'm joined by Kirill Dmitriev, who is the CEO of Russian Direct Investment Fund. Kirill, good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
The latest developed drugs that have been going through clinical trial. Tell me more about the antiviral drug.
Well, Russian Direct Investment Fund really benefited from its partnership with many international partners, including China, on learning about coronavirus and fighting coronavirus. So we first got information about coronavirus from China in January. We started investing in testing systems, in different drugs to fight the virus, in vaccine. And today we have a very important announcement, a very important development. Our drug called Favipiravir, which uses Favipiravir as the main substance, has been registered by Russian Health Ministry, so it's officially approved to use against COVID patients in Russia. So it's the first antiviral drug against COVID approved in Russia. But what's also very important is the first drug based on Favipiravir that is approved in the whole world against COVID.
Why is this special?
Well, when coronavirus struck us, there were no antiviral drugs to really fight the virus. And the only hope was to focus which existing drugs could actually have very significant impact on the virus. So right now, there are only two antiviral drugs in the world approved against the virus. It's our Favipiravir based on Favipiravir substance and Remdesivir that Gilead is doing in the US. So there are only two antiviral drugs that have gone through clinical trials and have received approval from governments to be used against coronavirus. So it's a very important step for the world to have drugs that can fight coronavirus. And we have some very strong statistics. So we have 90% of the patients who use this drug eliminate virus in 10 days versus 70% in the control group. But what's even more important, 65% eliminate the drug in the first 4 days versus 30% in the control group.
Yeah.
So there is major improvement in people's elimination of the virus. People now can stay in hospitals much shorter. So we really believe it's a game changer for healthcare systems around the world.
Right. Earlier, there were debates about Remdesivir because at different trials, it functioned differently depending on the goals and on the process. For example, that in China and that in the United States. So when it comes to effectiveness and efficacy, there is always a lot of room and space for discussion. What do you make of that?
Well, definitely, and that's why we worked very closely with Japan on this. We also worked very closely with China on this. And frankly, Russia benefited from clinical trials done on Favipiravir in China. Our Prime Minister, Mr. Mishustin, wrote a letter to Prime Minister Likitian 2 months ago, asking for information about clinical trials on Favipiravir to be shared. And we received very important information, very helpful information to us from China on clinical results that made us really focus on Favipiravir. We selected it out of many candidates to really make an investment in and really accelerated this procedure. We went and made some modifications to the drug. We also changed some parameters to have people take it, and we believe we improved it quite a bit. So the results we've shown are very significant and are very important, and it's a message also to other nations that they should really look into this drug. And we believe it's incredibly efficient. And once again, Russian health ministry is very conservative. It's probably as conservative as Chinese health ministry.
Yes.
So the fact that they approved this is really a very important step forward.
Talking about the efficacy, there is one thing that is very crucial. That is, what kinds of patients are you using the drugs against? For example, are they preliminary stage or critically ill? Are they receiving other kinds of medications? These are all very crucial information. Do you have any to share with us?
Definitely, you're exactly right. So the drug showed particularly strong efficiency in people with moderate cases. So mild and moderate cases, because the drug basically stops virus replication. So if you start taking it early, it shows very good results because virus just stops replication. And as I mentioned, for 65% of the patients taking the drug, it stops on day 4. The second important point is that we had control group, and control group was taking standard prescribed medications. It wasn't even a placebo. And we showed very significant effects versus the standard therapy.
Yeah.
And the third point is that we also are investing in plasma drugs based on antibodies that are found in plasma. We also have invested in and are building another drug that is fighting the response, excessive response of the immune system that leads to death in later stages of the diseases. So basically we have Favipiravir, which is mild cases, and we have plasma and this drug working with the immune system for really difficult cases.
For Russia, 400,000 confirmed cases. Last time I checked, 24 hours, there's a few hundred increase. That's quite a challenging situation. What do you make of the reality so far?
Well, we again, as a fund, have been very proactive, and we understood that there are several elements to address the coronavirus situation. It's testing, and we invested in a testing system and are doing a lot. It's drugs, and I mentioned big development on one drug, but we have 2 more we invested in. It's definitely vaccine development, and we are accelerating vaccine and believe that vaccine will be available already in some quantities in the fall. And then obviously working very well with our medical facilities. And we very much appreciate China's support because a number of our hospitals, they hosted Chinese doctors, very experienced in dealing with the virus. And again, the exchange of information, the exchange of protocols from China have been very helpful to Russia in that regard. So we believe it's about testing, it's about drug development, vaccine, and working with medical facilities. And also that allows us to overcome the quarantine efforts and go forward with economic development that is so much needed. So situation is definitely difficult, but it's much better than was before because now we have drugs, now we have promising vaccines, and now we have much more solid ground with clear protocols how to deal with COVID patients.
You talk about the protocols and the Chinese support and help in that regard. Tell me more about the working realities between the Chinese team, the Chinese doctors, and their Russian counterparts.
Well, once again, we benefited from learning a lot on clinical trials. Our great partner in China is BGI, which is one of the key developers of testing systems in China, and they really helped us understand the virus very early. We hosted several top doctor teams from China who came to our hospital called Mother and Child, which is the largest private health clinic in Russia, and they really shared the protocols on how to work with COVID patients. So there has been a great cooperation between Russia and China on this, and we believe it's an example for how countries can cooperate on dealing with the virus. We also appreciate having received some of the medical equipment from China. Some of the regions we are using for some of our drugs also come from China. So there is a major cooperation between Russia and China on the virus.
What do you make of the next stage of, social distancing and the opening up of the economy depending on the qualities of social distancing?
Well, social distancing is absolutely critical, and the virus didn't go anywhere. it's still out there, and if social distancing protocols are not followed, virus will come back in very big waves. So I think it's very important up until most of the people are vaccinated, that very strict social distancing rules are followed, because otherwise we'll have wave after wave of virus hitting us. So I think it's time to really focus on making sure that we have very strict social distancing rules over the next 3, 4, 5 months until vaccine becomes available and people get vaccinated. And frankly, that is the only way to save the lives, in addition to obviously drugs we have and other ways. But this is very important, and it seems like a small thing to follow social distancing rules. But I think we see that countries that follow them are just much more effective in containing the virus than countries do not follow them.
How important it is, sir, for you to see the international cooperation, whether it's information sharing, whether it's clinical trials, whether it is eventually used in the hospitals, the international cooperation in this regard?
International cooperation is absolutely key. And as I mentioned, we received first information from China, and this allowed us to move very quickly. And we believe that because the speed is so important, and in vaccines, in drugs, it's very important to share information so that we can address this situation in all countries very quickly. And frankly, it cannot be done without very big aspect of international cooperation. And even little things matter. It was very interesting for us to see after we announced this development with the drug, we expected, people to be happy. But we saw many countries are really saying, well, what about this with Russia doing this? And is it really happening? Is it not really happening? People try to make it political. And we believe it's impossible and very negative to make coronavirus fight political. Coronavirus fight is about fighting jointly the virus. It can only be done by joining forces of many countries. And frankly, countries who understand it will be much more successful in fighting the virus jointly.
We see a pandemic, a global challenge in front of us amid the geopolitics and the politics and the elections. Mr. Dmitriev, you are sophisticated enough about politics. What do you make of this mixture?
Well, I think the world is in a very explosive situation right now, and basically lots of layers of negativity are combining together to really have what could be an explosive cocktail and could have really bad repercussions for the economy. Because what we see is lots of negative news for the market. We see lots of debt. We see lots of shocks that could create major reduction of the market. And of course, we see that many countries will have GDP reductions this year of 5 to 7%. So this is a very challenging time. And it's a time to really act together. And for example, on vaccines, we see the next opportunity for partnership. We know there is a great vaccine that China is developing. Russia has several vaccines it's working on. There is going to be a vaccine summit hosted by UK this week. And those are important initiatives to make sure people of the world have enough vaccines very quickly. And this, again, can only be done through international cooperation.
Of course, whether it's drugs or therapeutic drugs or vaccines, there's always the issue whether it belongs to one country or it belongs to the international community. Your thought?
Well, and again, we know that lots of people try to make vaccines and try to make vaccines proprietary. We believe that sharing of information and socialization of vaccine development is very important. At the end of the day, our scientists in China, in Russia, in the US, in Europe, in the Middle East, they're all very brilliant, but combining the efforts, that can be very effective. So specifically, we are open to work with some of the international vaccines. We hope that other countries sort of are open to cooperation on our vaccines. And this joint cooperation on vaccines is a way to show positivity going forward.